I'm Troy, and welcome to our channel, Bonded Together. If you're new to our channel, please consider subscribing. You can check out our introduction video by clicking up here to get to know Gilbert and me a little better. Those of you who know me know my story, but I thought it was time to share publicly. I'm going to try to do this in one sitting if possible, but if not, I might have to break it into two parts, so we'll see how it goes. A little bit about my background. I knew at a very young age that I was different from my peers. I'd say around maybe 7, 8 years old, that I was probably attracted to my same sex, but of course, when you're that young, you don't know terms for that. I grew up in a Christian, independent, fundamental Baptist home, and if you know anything about your denominations, you know that that's about the most ultra-conservative denomination that you could be a part of. But, you know, I didn't have any trouble growing up in this environment. And, you know, I actually loved being part of our church and getting involved. And I also had very loving parents who worked very hard to provide for us. You know, very good relationship. I wouldn't say anything out of the ordinary, really. And part of our parents working so hard was to be able to afford to send us to Christian school starting in 2nd grade all the way through college. During that time, I did date girls, you know, when I got to be junior high, you know, high school age. As you see, so stereotypically sometimes, gay guys just kind of generally gravitate to hang out with the girls, and I did that in a big way. Like I said, I went to Christian college, Bob Jones University, and I graduated with a church music degree. Although I knew I was attracted to men the older I got, it was something that, of course, I was going to keep very secret inside of me, because the penalties and, you know, the preaching that you had heard, you knew that it was nothing that you would want to ever admit to anybody. In fact, sometimes you didn't even want to admit it to yourself that you were attracted to men. During college, I did date a couple girls, one pretty seriously. You know, we called it off about my junior year. After I graduated, I was offered a job at my home high school. And I kind of came back pretty defeated, because I thought for sure I was going to be able to find a girl that I could marry, and it would actually take care of this issue that I had, a burden that I was carrying around privately that was just really heavy upon my heart all these years. We found out that same fall a new teacher was also hired, another female teacher was hired from another Christian college. And so, long story short, you know, this was going to be the answer to my prayers of my same-sex attractions. We ended up dating, got engaged that December, and then the following July of 1992, we got married. We both taught at my home high school for 3 years, and then after that, her father, who was a pastor in the Milwaukee area, decided to open a small Christian school in his church, and so he asked if both me and my wife would move up there and help start this school. During that time, we ended up having 3 beautiful children, which I will never regret. If there's anything that came out of that relationship that was positive, of course it was those 3 children. As time went on in our marriage, you know, those attractions never went away. They stuck there. In fact, they seemed to actually kind of grow stronger as time went on. Of course, I knew down deep that I was gay, but I was never going to admit it, you know. I do remember this time our church would go out door to door inviting people to come to our church to visit. And I remember this time that I knocked on a door, and this guy came to the door, and, you know, I said, "Hey, my name's Troy, and I'd love to have you come and visit our church." And he said, "Oh, you wouldn't want me at your church." And it kind of took me by surprise. And I'm like, well, why not? He goes, "Well, I'm gay, and, you know, I just know you wouldn't want me there." And, you know, I remember this, I was almost frozen in my tracks, because this was really the first openly gay person that I'd ever met. I also witnessed a couple other people through time that were members of our church that actually came out, and what happened to them. which made a big impact on me as far as how I was going to keep my secret where nobody would ever know about it. I wasn't going to be humiliated like that after seeing what happened to them and kind of being tossed aside by the church. So after working in Milwaukee for, I'd say, about 10 years, we decided to move to Indiana. Working so closely with in-laws got to be a big challenge and a strain on our relationship. So I made the decision that we were going to move. Since my wife had done her student teaching in the area that we were going to move to, and also my twin brother, who was a pastor in the area about 25 minutes away, we felt like this would be a perfect area to settle down. It was after those first 2 years of living here that I had my first encounter with another guy. I'm not proud that it happened because I was within, my marriage at the time, but it did. And from that experience, it really sparked something inside me that was like, this is what I'd been searching for my entire life. It just made sense and clicked. Of course, I had tried to get rid of those feelings for, so many years by getting married to a woman because it was the right thing to do, right? But looking back, of course, now it doesn't work that way. So in September of 2006, I was outside mowing the grass, and it was a very hot day, and I started to have this argument within myself, almost like a split personality, of saying, I just cannot keep this secret within me any longer. And so I would say that, like I was going to determine to do that particular day. But then another part of me said, no, because if you know what's going to happen if you do that. Life as you know it will be over. But then I'd be like, well, but I can't stand living this dual, almost split personality within me all the time. It's just unbearable. And then, of course, the other voice would say, but you do know what is going to happen to you, You've seen it played out in other people's lives that have come out before you in the church, and it's never been a pretty sight. So I was so distraught. I was crying, I remember, and I decided to call my brother. Like I said, my twin brother lived about 25 minutes away, and he was a pastor. So I called him. I said, I'm really having a struggle here. He could tell that I was really in a bad state. And I said, I really need to come and talk to you tonight. And he said, okay. He said, you're not going to hurt yourself, right? He could tell that I was pretty upset. And I said, no. I said, I'll be fine, but I do need to come over and talk to you. So I finished mowing the lawn. The kids and my wife had been taking a nap. And I was taking a shower and getting ready, and I told her I was going to go, talk to my brother, which wasn't out of the ordinary because I had done that on other times when she didn't go along. But at some point, she suspected something was up. I don't know what it was that tipped her off, but she said, is everything all right? And I just fell apart, and I said, no, it's not. And so I sat down, we kind of sent the kids out of our room, and I just started sobbing uncontrollably. And so, she kept saying, well, what's wrong? And she just kept quizzing me, what's wrong? Are you sick? Do you have some terminal illness? Are you in trouble with the law? Questions like that, and I could not respond. I was so upset and just sobbing. She came around and said, do you think you're gay? And it kind of took me by surprise that she would even think to ask that. And I didn't answer, or shake my head one way or the other on that question. But again, another round of questions, and she came back again a second time and said, do you think you're gay? And at this point, I shook my head. Yes, I do. And immediately she said, well, you can get help for that. And after all of the soul searching that I had done before and the examples that I had seen go on before me, and knew what help meant, I said, I don't want help. She took that later, finding out, as me just throwing up my hands and saying, I'm just going to go my own way. I did kind of want help in some fashion. I don't know what that help would look like, but I wasn't going to be humiliated and rejected as much as I already had felt, just growing up. So that evening, I ended up going to see my brother after that anyway, and I told him the whole story as well. And he said pretty much the same thing, that, hey, you can overcome this. And I had my doubts, but I did feel better after talking to him, thinking maybe there was a slim chance that I might be able to overcome it. So I begged my wife at the time not to tell anybody. My parents were having a big anniversary celebration coming up, and I didn't want to ruin that whole celebration by my coming out story being shared with everybody. But she did tell her family and her parents. So at some point down the road, within the next couple of weeks, she had said, well, I really don't want you staying here at the house. And so I said, well, let me see if I can find an apartment, and see what I can do. Our finances were very tight. So I'd say 2 days after getting that apartment, her sister came down to be with her. Of course, she was pretty upset and was going to kind of be her support. So her parents were going to come down the next night. I remember going to work at my full-time job. I actually had my full-time job, and then I had a part-time retail job in the evenings. And so the plan was that I was going to come home and have dinner, and her parents were going to be there by that time. So I was a little nervous about going home and eating with them and not knowing what we would talk or how the conversation would go. I came home that evening, and her parents weren't there yet. So I was kind of relieved. So we had dinner and tucked the kids in. Her sister was still there. Then I went off to my part-time job at the retail store. I realized once I got to my job that I had forgotten my jacket. So I just thought to myself, well, I'll go by after work and get my jacket, because they are usually go to bed early type people, family, if you will. And so I just thought I'd just go in, grab my jacket, and then go to the apartment for the night. Well, after my shift got off, I'd say it was probably 10:30 going on 11. And I drove by the house and all the lights were on, which was very unusual because they all go to bed between 8 and 9 all the time. But all the lights in the house were on. I mean, not just like the living room lights. Everything was all lit up. I'm like, that's really odd. I'm not going in. It's not worth, causing confrontation just to get my jacket. I'll survive, the next day. Which, looking back, I very well should have gone into the house at that moment. So the next evening, I was going to do the same thing. I was going to come home for dinner to be with the kids like we had planned. Of course, I knew her parents had gotten there by then, so I was expecting that we were going to have some kind of a conversation about me coming out. I do remember talking to her on the phone that day and sort of getting just a real odd response, kind of vague. But anyway, I just thought, well, whatever, she just had a bombshell dropped on her, that her husband's gay. I drove home, drove up to the house, and there were no cars in the driveway, which I thought was very odd. Opened the garage door, nobody in there as well. But still, nothing was clicking on upstairs, I was thinking, that's kind of odd, but nothing was really clicking. But I didn't notice anything really too out of ordinary when I went in through the garage. And in our garage at the time, we had an entry that would go into a laundry room. And as soon as I stepped into that laundry room and noticed that our washer and dryer were gone, I knew exactly what had happened. And I just fell down, I remember, on my knees and sobbed like worse than ever before. They had taken everything in the house and took the kids without even an opportunity to say goodbye or anything. To this day, it was the most gut-wrenching, hurtful, punitive thing that she and her family could have done to me. And I'm still, 13 years later, still not over that. I just remember walking through the house, looking around, just in a daze, saying, I can't believe you did this. I've even known non-religious families that have gone through some kind of divorce or separation in their families, and I've never heard of anybody taking everything in the home like that and the children in that fashion. I think I'll stop this portion of my coming out story and call it as part 1. And if you would, come back and I will be posting part 2 for you to watch. Please consider subscribing to our channel, Bonded Together, and hit that bell notification if you want to get notified when we upload new video content. Also, check out some of the other videos that we've already made. Some of them are kind of crazy at this point, but we'd love to have you stick around with us and get to know us a little bit better. Thanks for watching.